Interesting. And so just to give you a context, I just wanted to mention that before Tal contacted me, Mike Davis, the author, emailed me and said, there's this guy that is out at Bombay Beach doing stuff. You have to meet him. And then I looked, you're a photographer and all this stuff, so I kind of knew you were on the radar.
Amazing, I didn't know this.
I first want to introduce myself. What is my interest out here? So I published a book in 2005 called Readings from the Salton Sea. And it's primarily a photo book. And it was the detritus of recreation, all these things that had happened. And when I was doing the photographs, I realized that there were so many different processes and systems of things going on. I really needed to explain it for my audience. So I ended up writing the essay in the beginning, and I learned a lot about the science behind, why the sea, its history, and so forth. And so that kind of set a precedent for the work that I do, which is research-based art. On occasion, I make things like I did this cabin project for Desert X, but I'm really more of a photographer, a documentarian. And so I've been working on a project. It's actually my Guggenheim project called the Mojave Project. I'm featuring this talk as part of the Mojave Project. It started late 2014. It's primarily online, so it's mojaveproject.org. I do these in-depth field dispatches on various subjects relating to all kinds of activity in the Mojave Desert. It's very eclectic and it jumps from subject to subject. So I've interviewed land speed racers at El Mirage. I've worked with Marta Beckett of the Armagosa Opera House. I've worked with geologists and on different types of topics related to what is found in the Mojave Desert region. So this talk, I'm actually have embarked on this series of dispatches that are really discussing how climate change, critical minerals, how renewables, all these things are converging to have this profound impact on the Desert West. And I think a lot of people, we're not aware of where the stuff we use, where it comes from, or how it is extracted, even water. A lot of people in Los Angeles aren't familiar with the LA Aqueduct comes from the Eastern Sierra area. So I've done a lot of projects that deal with these types of things, of educating people. And this one I decided to start kind of at the base. I've already done a dispatch on borax, and I'm actually going to pass this around because the website has everything, but I did a series of readers. I'm now on my 4th edition that I compiled all these different dispatches, and there's over 45 dispatches now. So I've done gold in the Mojave Desert, borates, borax, and so now I'm starting with lithium, and then I'm going to be going into other rare earths, critical minerals, because all of these things are going to be coming out of the desert and out of the Colorado Desert, which we're in. And there's really interesting things happening not too far from here, down where the volcanoes are in the mud pots, called direct lithium extraction. But before I get into that, I'm just going to kind of do an overview of what lithium is. So it's the lightest metal. It's 3rd on the periodic table. It's the lightest mineral after helium and hydrogen, which of course are gases. If it encounters water, it bursts into flames. So we've all heard about Teslas and things, inflated environments catching on fire. Lithium deuteride was an essential fuel component for the Castle Bravo nuclear explosion that happened at the Bikini Atoll. So this was the largest hydrogen bomb detonated by the US. However, the Russians, Soviets, they did a much, much larger one. So my mentor when I lived in San Francisco is the artist Bruce Conner, filmmaker. I'm not sure how many people know of him, but I thought I would use this image that he shows of Castle Bravo called Bombhead, just to give you kind of a context. But lithium was the main fuel. And it got so out of control, they didn't realize this explosion. They didn't account for this. It's used to treat mood disorders, schizophrenia, bipolar. In the 1920s, there was a number of sodas that were medicinal. Of course, we all know about Coca-Cola with Coke. Well, 7-Up had lithium. So it was this lithiated soda, and eventually they realized that it could have problems with pregnant women and so forth, so that was phased out. So lithium really wasn't that important. It's used in glass making, lubricants, things like that. So up until the 1990s, when Sony first came out with the first commercial rechargeable lithium-ion battery, there wasn't a lot of use, to mine it. It was actually sometimes considered a waste material. So the only place that we have where we have lithium is actually in a place in Nevada, Western Nevada, called Silver Peak. So up until now, this is the only place that's been producing it, and it's only 1% of the worldwide supply, so it's not very much. So I'm going to get into that a little bit later. But right now, because of this trend to move into renewables and for us to start driving EVs, by 2030, it's estimated over half of our cars in the US are going to be EV. And by 2030 worldwide, to meet the targets, we have to convert over. I think my notes got kind of messed up there. So the demand would be 40-fold by 2050, how much lithium we need. That's a lot of lithium. And that's not just, there's lithium, copper, all kinds, cobalt, all kinds of things that we need to put in these batteries, which typically weigh about 113 pounds. So we're gonna need a lot of it. There's about 98 million tons worldwide, and as I said earlier, we only produce 1%. So there's been this push through the Biden-Harris administration for us to ramp up critical minerals. And this is going to be of a magnitude that is hard to imagine. I've heard just to produce as much energy, electricity that we need, if you can imagine the entire state of Texas covered in solar panels, that's how much, if we are going to continue with business as usual, continue our way of life, which is very consumptive. So there's 3 different ways we get lithium. There are brines, there are hard rock deposits, there's claystone deposits. Primarily, most of the lithium that we use now comes from what is called the lithium triangle. Let me skip through some stuff. Just a car caught on fire. Okay, this is the one. And I'm using lithium triangle in quotes because I think a better term, as NRDC says here, is the Puna de Atacama, because it more appropriately conveys the unique and significant ecoregion rather than just a place to extract critical minerals. So I think we want to use that term rather than using lithium triangle, but the area where most of the lithium comes now is actually Bolivia, Argentina, and Chile, in the Atacama Desert. So this is a continental brine area. So they pump up brines from underneath the playa, and then they do these evaporation ponds. So it's a very slow process. It takes about 18 to 24 months. Not a lot of energy, it's not very carbon intensive, but it takes a lot of land, about 3,000 acres for one of these. They depleted over 60% of the groundwater in the area, and this was in 2018. And so it's probably doubled by then. So it's a very contentious subject. For 1 metric ton of lithium processed this way, it takes over 500,000 gallons of water per metric ton.
Where does the water go? Does it evaporate?
It evaporates. And then there's also fresh water to do, like to clean it up, to do different things like that. So there's a lot of social ecological impacts. And even Chile, Bolivia, and Mexico nationalized their mineral reserves, lithium, because they want to control that from capitalistic exploitation. Most of the lithium right now is going to China. They produce 75% of batteries worldwide. And so Biden and Harris administration trying to change that, want to have production here. The other source is hard rock. So this is Greenbushes, this is in Australia. You've probably seen large copper mines, gold mines, things like this. Very, very carbon intensive. It takes between 9 and 17 per metric ton. It costs 9 to 17 tons of CO2 just to make 1 metric ton. Part of that has to do with shipping it to China to make the battery. So it's going from Australia, it's being mined, very intensive process. They're mining it, they're roasting, using all this heat and stuff to break down the ore, to process it into lithium carbonate equivalent, and then they ship it over there. So it's not the best way to make lithium. And so if you think the lithium in your electric vehicle, how many people drive electric vehicle? Anyone? How about a hybrid? Okay, hybrid. I'm on my second. So right now, our cars, they're not very green. And so there are new technologies that we're hoping that will improve that, but I'll get to that a little bit later in my talk. So I'm just gonna go to this next slide. So this is a claystone deposit, and so this is the third type of lithium. So it's actually a boron claystone deposit, and this is up at a place called Rhyolite Ridge. And you may have heard about it because it's been a very contentious mining project that's run by Ioneer, which gets their name. They dropped the P from Pioneer and renamed it. They're Australian owned. There is a tiny plant that grows in this area called Teams buckwheat that is now endangered. And I'm gonna play a short clip of Patrick Donnelly from the Center for Biological Diversity talking about the plight of Teams buckwheat. But first want to backtrack a little bit. So in this area, this is where we get our lithium. It's called Silver Peak. It's in central west Nevada. This actual production is one company, Albemarle. They're based in South Carolina. They're actually the ones that started this type of technique. So they developed it actually at this place in Nevada, and then they brought it down to South America, implemented it in the 1980s, I guess, when they started doing that, maybe later. And so that is how all of the different lithium mines that are evaporative, that's how the lithium is produced in South America. So this area, it's called Clayton Valley. It's an interesting area. It's very kind of isolated. They're trying to double production here. And what is interesting about this, because Nevada is where we mine most everything, mostly gold. It has been called like a white gold frenzy because over the last 5 years, over 21,000 claims have been placed just for lithium. That's a lot, but keep in mind that each of these mines, it takes about 250 claims to actually have a working large-scale industrial mine. There's 11 different projects in Clayton Valley, and this particular operation, they're using far more than 500,000 gallons of water per metric ton. They're up to over 700,000, and they want to double it. So it's likely that these projects that are done with this evaporative technique, they're going to completely drain all the groundwater in that part of Nevada. And so there's a lot of people, a lot of rural residents and people that were first like, yes, we want this industry, jobs and things, and now they're going, wait a second, they're just going to run us dry. And what these multinational mines do, they come to a place, they have no skin in the game. They go in, they do their thing, they leave. And they're enabled by what is called the General Mining Act of 1872, which hasn't been updated significantly since the Civil War. So if any of these operations, they take place on public land in the United States. They don't lease it like oil and gas or coal. They actually have to do these claims. And there's a lot of people that do speculation. So you have all these prospectors that are going out, they're making these claims, they're hoping to find something significant, and they're gonna sell it to a bigger company to exploit. So that's the reason there's so many people that are trying to do this. And it helps because in 2022, lithium shot up to 80,000 a metric ton. Well, that was kind of a fluke. It's now down to 15,000. So it's been this, like, in terms of investments, it's this roller coaster. But it's probably gonna stabilize around 15 to 20,000. So in Silver Peak, I'm really interested in this particular area because it's really kind of at the edge of the Mojave Desert. When I'm doing my work for Mojave Project, I use the ring where Joshua trees grow. So its project is in 4 states, California, Nevada, a little bit of Utah, a little bit of Arizona. So this is just at the edge where they peter out, around by Tonopah, Nevada. So it's really kind of the Great Basin area. This is just like a little sign to give you an idea what Silver Peak looks like. So some of you may have heard about Thacker Pass, and I'm going to just point out some new mining projects that are starting to be constructed. And so Thacker Pass is up northern Nevada in southern Oregon, and it's a vast caldera that was formed by a super volcano. So there's all of this material, this very, very rich claystone that has lithium that they can process, which is similar to the hard rock processing. It's going to produce a ton of tailings. Sorry, let me get the number correct. It's over, I think, 350,000 tons, 1 million cubic yards of toxic tailings. And it has 2 tons of CO2 for every ton is produced. This is an ancestral cultural landscape of the Southern Paiute and Shoshone. And this is an area where there was a massacre in the 19th century. And this is considered a sacred place. So there's been a lot of activism to try to keep this mine from going into production, but it is going into production. And these are just some pictures of some of the protests and things. I think it's interesting what's happening because what's happening at the Salton Sea may displace some of the need for these other types of projects that are more carbon intensive, that are more controversial, but they're already getting started, so we may end up with a lot of really big pits that are just going to be abandoned. And so for people like me, environmentalists, we're very concerned about how this is happening so fast, although we need to get these things into production. So this is a map actually of Nevada, but of the western United States, of all the different lithium projects that are going into production. Doesn't mean they're all going to be happening at once. A lot of them won't have investment funding and things like that, but there's over 130 just in the West. That's a lot of mines. You know, considering that I think there's 3 actual working gold mines, 3 in California right now. There's a lot more in Nevada. So another claystone mine that is on the other side of Silver Peak is called Rhyolite Ridge. And this is a project by Iron Air. And this is a little buckwheat that is this super hardy plant that only grows on 10 acres right in the center of this proposed mine. It's really interesting, the story, because the BLM knew about it, but they didn't bother to tell the mining company or the just ignored it and went ahead with their plans to produce. But it's named after this gentleman, he's a botanist, and he basically said that if you wanted to wipe out the entire population, you could do so with a bulldozer in just a couple hours. So it's only on 10 acres. It's endemic, doesn't grow anywhere else. And the fact that it's evolved in this very harsh environment, I think, thinking of biodiversity, thinking beyond our human selves, I think it's worth for us to protect something like this. And the first slide you saw with the big, that was actually the close lithium. So this is just one of the images of the processing plant that's going to be over a couple thousand acres. There's some interesting things about this. They're actually going to be generating their own electricity. I don't quite understand it, but it has something to do with the sulfuric acid that they're producing. That's producing steam. It's complicated. But again, they don't have a lot of water here either. So I'm going to play Patrick Donnelly. He's the Great Basin Director from the Center for Biological Diversity. The story of Teams Buckwheat and the things that he's been fighting for with the center is really fascinating, so I just want you to hear. I'm not going to get through all of this, but you can get this online at Mojave Project.
Well, I'm Patrick Donnelly. I'm Great Basin Director with the Center for Biological Diversity. I'm based in the Death Valley region, Eastern California, and I work to protect public lands and endangered species across the Great Basin and northern Mojave deserts. This is my passion. This is why I wake up in the morning. This is what gets me going, is protecting endangered species and biodiversity. Biodiversity is what makes life on Earth possible. It is why we're able to breathe clean air and drink clean water, and protecting that is my life's mission. That life's mission has brought us to the Silver Peak Range here, a mountain range in Esmeralda County, western Nevada, on the kind of edge of the Great Basin. And the Silver Peak Range is a 9,000-foot mountain range that brings down good amounts of precipitation relative to the desert. We're in a place called Rhyolite Ridge on the north side of that mountain range. And there is a number of interesting species in this area. Bighorn sheep are very common here, so we'll see quite a few bighorn when we're in this area. There's a spring to the north of us here called Cave Spring, and the sheep like to come down there and get a drink. It's said there's snails in that spring, but that's kind of a mysterious thing. But the real reason we're here is Teams Buckwheat, which is a rare wildflower, a small perennial herb that lives right here at Rhyolite Ridge on just 10 acres and nowhere else on Earth. Plant is highly endangered and has brought our attention and the attention of the world, really, right here to the Silver Peak Range and Rhyolite Ridge. Well, Teams Buckwheat, this rare plant, is adapted, specially adapted to the highly mineralized soils of Rhyolite Ridge. And those soils include high levels of lithium and boron. Lithium being a commodity much in desire these days. There's a proposed lithium boron mine here, the Rhyolite Ridge Lithium Boron Project, which would be a 1,000-foot deep open pit mine, covering 200 acres with 1,000 football field worth of waste rock dumps. And this would surround the buckwheat's habitat, getting as close as 13 feet through the buckwheat populations. This would mean utter devastation for the buckwheat. It would not survive, being an island of buckwheat habitat in the middle of complete destruction. So the Center for Biological Diversity and our colleagues in the scientific community have been advocating to save Teams Buckwheat, getting it endangered species protections, litigating when we've had to, and doing everything we can, pulling out all the stops to save this little plant from extinction, because it really is a true case of facing down the barrel of extinction. So I first found out about Teams Buckwheat from Dan Patterson, who was a BLM employee at the Tonopah field office. He was someone I'd known for many years. He was in the conservation community before working at BLM. Dan texted me, I think, and he texted me and said, BLM's messing around with this rare plant, you've got to look into it. And I didn't look into it. Then he texted me again, and he said, you should do a FOIA on this stuff about Teams Buckwheat. There's exploration activity, it's harming the plant. And I finally did. I did the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request, I should say. and received documents about Teams buckwheat from BLM and just began to dive in. This was an obscure species. I mean, I bet there were fewer than 100 people on the face of the earth who knew Teams buckwheat existed before all this happened. And so there was very little information on it. It was basically what I could cobble together from BLM and a 1995 status report written by the Nevada State botanist, which said in 1995, boy, someone ought to protect this plant or it might become endangered. And they never did. We discovered it basically through Dan in 2019 and began our journey with Teams buckwheat. So when we first encountered Teams buckwheat in June of 2019, Pioneer, the mining company, had been doing exploration activities out here. That's when you drill some test holes, you see what's down the well, and it almost always involves, blading new roads, creating impact areas, staging areas. They have big water bladders out here for water for the drilling. A lot of impacts. And we discovered these impacts right in the middle of the habitats. And it was extremely concerning. And that's really the origin of why we got involved to begin with, was because of the exploration activities. But in finding the documents and so forth about the exploration, we found plans for the mine. And that's when we realized, oh wow, this mine is going to encompass this whole area. Now, the early plans for the mine did plan on destroying all of the buckwheat's habitat. It would just swallow it up in the mine. And so Pioneer's plan at that time was to transplant the buckwheats somewhere else, put them where they don't belong functionally, create new habitats. And so they were doing a transplant experiment. They were growing them in greenhouses and sticking them in places where they don't belong. And BLM was sort of just permitting this, and it was a contract through the University of Nevada, Reno. Turned out to be a $250,000 contract. I think on its face, this premise is kind of bunk. I mean, you can't destroy a species' native range and stick it somewhere else and call it conservation. So Naomi Fraga, who's the conservation director of the California Botanic Garden, was out here with me looking at a different plant, the Tacoma verge beak that grows down in the valley there at the Playa in Fish Lake Valley. And we decided to do a drive-by up here to see Teams buckwheat on our way home. And this was September 12th, 2020. We got up here and we were just going to take a peek, and we noticed something was off. We went out and looked at population 1 right here, and there was a bunch of holes in the ground. There was scattered dead pieces of buckwheat. Something really disastrous had happened, and we didn't know what it was, but clearly there was destruction in the habitat. And it was late in the day. It's a 4-hour drive back to my house, and the dog's freaking out in the car. And we were just like, oh my God, we just need to come back tomorrow and look at this. So we drove 200 miles home, left the dog at home the next day, drove 200 miles back here, and surveyed the entire population on September 13th, 2020, and discovered utter devastation across the entire 6 subpopulations of Teams buckwheat. Survey estimate was a total of about 50% destruction of the plants. We surveyed one subpopulation after another, POP 1, POP 2, 4, and 5, and we got to 6. And POP 6 is the biggest, best population. The plants are the most intact, it's the least disturbed, lots of recruitment, it's awesome. And I totally lost it when we got to POP 6. I broke down crying, pounding my fists. It was one of the most difficult events of my life. So we went home and we told the world. It certainly looked to us like someone had dug up these plants. There were holes in the ground looked like Swiss cheese. There were social trails that had not been there previously. There was lots of disturbance. It looked like destruction and human caused. The mining company had a bounty out for Teams buckwheats, for people to find new buckwheats. They had a wanted poster down at the general store in town. This certainly all seemed related to us. And as we were driving out, we said, is there any other explanation? Could this be herbivory? And it was like, no, of course not. That's insanity. And it was implausible and impossible. And so we went home and we had all of our photos and we wrote up a press release and we told the world about this destruction.
Okay, I'm gonna stop there. So what he's put out wanted posters for this, and so probably some people, because it was a bounty, went up there and conveniently just tried to get rid of it, but they didn't quite get rid of it, and it actually pushed it to be listed as endangered. So it is protected, but still the plight of Team Buckwheat is kind of, hanging there. We're not sure, the Minuses are gonna work around it. So imagine like a little 10-acre island in one of those big pit mines that I showed you. So it's kind of impossible. I just want to say as an aside, has anyone followed Prime Pays but Botany doesn't? Okay, so there's a really great one that he does on Team Buckwheat, so I recommend that. So I'm going over these different projects that should not be lithium mines. I'm not saying that we shouldn't mine lithium. I just want to make that really clear, but there's places to do it, there's places not to. So this General Mining Act, it pretty much makes highest use of any type of extraction mining industry. They get to say, like, there's gold there, I have a claim, I should be able to go and get that. Now, if it's in a national park, different things like that, you can't mine, but it's really hard to withdraw special lands from mineral entry. Very difficult. So there is another mine, and this is Rover Critical Minerals, and I wrote about Devil's Hole and divining Devil's Hole earlier in Mojave Project. It is an absolutely fascinating place. So this is in a spring complex called Ash Meadows. What you're looking at here is actually the entry into this fossil portal. They don't know how deep this aquifer is. It's a whole series of caves that goes on for, infinity, it seems. And the water is ancient. This is actually divers from the National Park Service. They're able to go into Devil's Hole to do these fish counts because Devil's Hole has this one of the rarest species of fish in the world, called the Devil's Hole pupfish. It hovers around a population of maybe, sometimes it has gone down to low as below 30 to over 100. It seems like they've established it, it's doing fairly well, but it lives at the very top of that cavern here, in this pool in here. So this is about 45 feet to walk down here. So you're looking through water from below. Another diver has taken a picture of the diver towards the front. Mm-hmm. It's crystal clear water. It's the same temperature over our bodies. It's a very special place. It's a cultural landscape for the Timbisha Shoshone people. So this is in this complex, Ash Meadows. This is Crystal Pool, but Rover Critical Minerals decided that they want to put a mine here. They want to do a big pit claystone mine. And so now all of these groups are fighting to keep this mine from happening. But again, it's very hard once a extraction entity decides that they want to mine something for it to be withdrawn. So it's just a big drain on all these nonprofits' expenses. They're always doing litigation, lawyers, and all these things. And they managed to stop this for temporarily. Actually, the BLM did something they hardly ever do, and when I say BLM, Bureau of Land Management, they said last summer, yeah, you guys have a go-ahead to explore. They were gonna explore less than 1,500 feet from a Fairbanks Spring, which has another endangered pupfish and another small fish, and there's a possibility if they hit the wrong thing, they could completely drain Ash Meadows. And so it's very crucial that this does not happen. And so this is it's very similar to the Devil's Hole pupfish. The Devil's Hole pupfish is the reason we have the EPA. It started with the Devil's Hole pupfish in the early 70s. So Ash Meadows, there was agriculture there. They wiped out all of the springs. So the spring that I showed you in the previous photograph, that's all been reconstructed. Okay, so then a housing development, they wanted to do a new Las Vegas suburb up there, and they raised it. And so they had to completely recreate these spring complexes. And so it was very contentious in the area. So these are bumper stickers from during the time when the EPA was going in to try to protect it. So there's a whole history of fighting for this landscape that could be threatened by, in the name of, having to mine lithium for protecting our environment. This is actually a simulation of the Devil's Hole area that I showed you. This is a place where they have a backup colony. Below this, like you can walk around this is an exact replica of actually, and it's a multi-million-dollar facility just to protect the Devil's Hole pupfish. So this is the area kind of around the backside of Ash Meadows where Rover wants to do their mine and they want to explore. They haven't been given the go-ahead yet, but it's possible. I find it really interesting when I go to these websites, they never mention that they're in close proximity to a national wildlife refuge. They don't want investors to know this. They don't want them to know about Teams buckwheat, any of these things that are threatened. But they're doing a really good job because, now they can sell their products like we are saving the climate. They're the same ones that oil, gas leases, but now they're lithium, they can make a lot of money. So they've been able to get the green light and they are proposing a lot of mines in places where there shouldn't be. So this is Ash Meadows. This is around where Devil's Hole is. It's actually a national park. It's part of Death Valley National Park, so it's a little separate unit of it. And then this is the National Wildlife Refuge. So this is Fairbanks Spring, where there's a bunch of endemic species here, but this is where they want to do exploration. And over here, and then there's another company that wants to do additional there. So this is just a storm that I caught. It's a really beautiful area. This whole area is going to be industrialized with solar, with mining. It's tragic for people like myself who really need these wide open places that we feel very small within. To see these things become industrialized like this. I think there's places for us to put industrial solar and wind. I think it should be on roofs as much as possible. And we should avoid doing undisturbed public lands. But this is the cheapest way for these corporations. They're going to get the land and they're going to destroy thousands of acres of habitat. Okay, so there's something good about this story. So here we are at the Salton Sea. And, I followed all the things that were happening with geothermal, found that really interesting. This is, there's very young volcanoes through this area. Actually, Mullet Island, where Captain Davis had Hell's Kitchen, was actually an island, which is now no longer an island because of the recession of the shore. So there's several geothermal companies, and Berkshire Hathaway has been there with geothermal. I think they have like 10 or 11 geothermal facilities. There's energy source and there's controlled thermal resources. So you may have heard about this because this has just come out in the last 6 to 8 months. We have a huge, vast resource of lithium, not in the Salton Sea. It's actually, 5,000 feet or more underneath the Salton Sea in what's called a diaphragm. So there's lithium-rich rocks that they come in contact with mineralized water, lots of other minerals, but they're very, very concentrated in terms of the lithium content. But it's very difficult because it's super, super heated. It's very caustic. So if you put it through pipes and things, it can destroy stuff very quickly. So it's been very challenging for them to be able to come up with a technique where they can actually take this lithium out without doing the evaporative technique, so they don't have to wait 18 to 24 months. They have a very small footprint. This is kind of the footprint of the place. And they do it within, hours. They take the lithium out. And they're gonna get a lot of lithium. The lithium is going to be 30 times more than they could get from Rhyolite Ridge, 3 times more than they get annually from Greenbush's, the hard rock mine. And the possibility is they could put hard rock lithium mining out of business, which is good because it's very, again, carbon intensive, energy intensive. So a lot of people who've been looking into lithium extraction, we're all like kind of hoping this really comes online. But of course, there's a lot of things about this area. You know, it is a place where people can thrive in California, where they can still afford to buy a home. There's a lot of agricultural workers. That's the primary economy down here. So this will completely, if this comes online, it will completely change this place. And it looks like it's going to happen. So, you know, and they're also doing things correctly where they're working with the community, they're having training programs, they want to hire locally. They're doing everything they should do as mining companies because they're in California. And they're even going to tax it. Because currently, any minerals that are taken from the ground, there's no royalty. The companies can come in, and then they can leave, and then our tax dollars pay for the cleanup. And they've made all this money off it without giving anything back to the American taxpayer. So this is something where they're going to have a tax, if it passes in the fall, where the area could really blossom. The other thing that's great about direct lithium extraction is the geothermal is running, it's the energy to produce it. So it's net zero. So that's really great right now. And so Newsom, people have been promoting this. So these three companies, I think they're getting into production, but they have to do it at scale. But this could completely disrupt this whole investment economy. So if anyone is doing investments and you're doing energy and things like this, you may want to look very closely into what's happening right now because there's going to be major upheaval. The only thing though is all of these processes take a lot of water, okay? And so that is the main thing here that's going to be problematic. Because you guys know that the Salton Sea, the reason it's receding is there's no longer the same amount of water, agricultural runoff. It's actually a sump for agriculture coming in to maintain the levels of the sea. And there was also a water transfer in the mid-2000s where that water, excess water through the Imperial Irrigation District, which has senior rights on the Colorado River, which is a big deal. That water is going to San Diego and other places. So there's not really any water for any type of industrial production on large scale. Okay, so it's all kind of taken for. So they have to negotiate, the DLE companies, with the IID to actually get, water for production. And so that's something like, if you've heard the Colorado River, it's dwindling very fast. Even though we had a lot of rain recently, it's over allocated. There's going to be a lot of problems in the next 20 years because all of Southern California either gets water from Northern California, from the Eastern Sierra, and from the Colorado River. And so, we're going to have to figure some things out. But the nice thing is the DLE, it's still quite a bit of water. I think it's 2 energy sources. They're about 3 billion gallons of water a year combined, 250,000 gallons for hard rock, so it's using a lot of water. But this is what Albemarle at Silver Peak, this is the brine. It's nearly 800 million gallons of brine and some fresh water in processing. So you can see that the amount of water that's going to these things, and that just wreaks havoc with groundwater tables, subsidence. There's places in the Central Valley that 40 feet the land was, and it's dropped that far from groundwater pumping. So this causes all kinds of problems. So that is the one thing that I talk about in the dispatch that came out, is like we have to find out how we're going to deal with water use there. So what I've been talking about, you can go to mojaveproject.org and you can get the full dispatch and you can listen to the rest of Patrick talking about King's buckwheat. So I just want to end with this. This is a really great report that came out last year, UC Davis, the Climate and Community Project. So they're saying, hey, we don't need to do this much mining. And I'm just talking about lithium, I'm talking about copper, everything else we need to do this transition. We need to stop driving so much. We need public transportation. That's really what we need to do. And unless we are all willing to give up something, okay, you know, we're going to contribute to loss of biodiversity, loss of water, all these types of things. So that's what they're promoting. They're really promoting ways for us to ramp up public transportation and really make changes so we don't have to do as much mining. So this is the Earl for Mojave project, and I just want to leave it as about 10 till 4. So does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
Where is that plant, that direct lithium mining one? That's here in Salt Lake.
Yeah, it's just down here